This is a response to a video made by, I think, by Pathless Path, although the video I saw was on the holonsnetwork channel, so I'm not quite sure who I'm responding to here, but it was really, the title of the video is "What is your practice?" And it's an invitation for people to share what they do in terms of something like meditation or contemplative practice. You know, just what they do and what their experiences are, I guess. And it's linked into this thing, which I didn't know about until I saw the video, called the Big Sit, which is where you know, everyone is invited to sit down for a bit every day and do some contemplation or some meditation. I mean, I don't do anything like that. I don't have any formal practice like that, although I have done a bit of meditation in the past, and Tai Chi and Qigong, kind of martial art based stuff, but not formal meditation. Although having said, but I do think, if I can take some liberties with the definition of what constitutes a practice here, I do think a lot of the things I do have that general frame around them. I can think of about 3 or 4 different things actually, so I'll probably make a couple of different videos on this. But I think the first one, and this isn't unique to me by any means, the first one is to do with poetry, reading and writing poetry, because I think there's a strong sense in which reading and writing poetry is a kind of contemplative practice or a kind of meditation, and I know it is in some cultures. It's just not in Britain right now at all. Certainly when I read poetry, it's not like reading anything else. It's not like reading a technical manual or a scientific paper or a textbook on something. It's not like reading a short story either, or a collection of jokes or an Argos catalogue. It's very, very different, and I think its difference is that it's working on some kind of cognitive level which is different to the overt, well, I know this is really, it's working on a cognitive level different to the overt content. And in fact there's a whole school of literary analysis coming out of stylistics, a practice called cognitive poetics, which is exactly about that. It's about analysing poetry in terms of its cognitive effects really, and using the insights from cognitive linguistics. And within that, within cognitive poetics and the analysis of poetry, there is, you know, quite a lot of evidence that some poetry is designed intentionally or accidentally to promote cognitive effects which are very conciliant with meditation and contemplative practice. Ray Van Soer, I'm not sure I got his name right, he had a book out called something like On the Shores of Nothingness, where he's talking about poetry having that effect, and how the figurations, the figures of speech in the poetry produce that effect, and things like the rhythms of the poetry produce that effect, or some of it has like an incantatory nature which produces particular cognitive responses. And more recently, in a couple of the journals that I subscribe to, which is about cognitive linguistics and cognitive poetics, there's been some talk about particular effects in poetry to do with the opening up of a kind of metaphorical void, sometimes called a lacuna, where although it's not on the surface of the poem, you wouldn't just, it's not about the void, it's not about spaces, but hidden within the figuration of the speech and in the speech patterns is this sense of some void opening up, which your conscious mind doesn't really engage with, but at the level of non-conscious cognition, it promotes that kind of a relationship to the void that you might associate with certain practices like meditation and contemplation. And we'll just turn around and don't across the road. Come on, pups! I think the same is also true, for different reasons, to do with writing poetry. I don't write much poetry these days. I used to, and I guess most people have got a drawer full of poems that are hiding somewhere. But certainly I think writing poetry is not like writing anything else either. And for me, the salient moment in writing poetry, which relates to this "what is your practice" thing, is a moment that Eugene Gendlin talks about. I like Eugene Gendlin. He's not a very good writer, but his ideas are fantastic. But it's this thing that Eugene Gendlin talks about, this moment in writing poetry, which he associates with the ellipsis, the 3 dots at the end that you put at the end of a sentence when the sentence isn't completed. It's like if you're writing a sentence, you break off, you put 3 dots. So that's the ellipsis, to mean it's incomplete. And he says, Gendlin says, when poets are writing, quite often they get to a certain point in their poem, in their writing of their poem, and they kind of stop, and there's these 3 dots. And he says they often do this gesture with their hand like this. and this is the ellipsis gesture, he says, and it's this weird moment of kind of waiting, what Keats calls negative capability. It's this moment of kind of waiting, but you're not really waiting for something, you're just waiting, or a kind of listening, but again you're not listening to something, it's actually there, you're just engaging with some kind of felt sense of listening and passiveness but openness at the same time. And I think that's a really significant and salient moment in the writing of poetry, which I have to say I haven't done for a long time because I hardly ever do it these days, but I do miss that moment. But again, I think that's a contemplative practice in a sense, so that has a strong relationship to contemplative practice. So yeah, so just in terms of the question, what is your practice? To the extent that I still do those things, I occasionally do, right? Then those are one or possibly two of them. Poems.